I'm so excited to share with you chapter one of my book, Faith Crushed in the Classroom. I want to share with you a little bit about chapter one, which is called Allow Me to Introduce Myself. And this chapter asks questions about identity. Is identity something that can change? Should it change? Well, God showed me Isaiah 43, verse 1, which says, Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. And so, one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn was that my identity was to be founded in God. Because when our identities are not in God, then we can put them in things that are not going to actually help us in our lives. And so, as I read through the first chapter, I'm going to invite you to pause the video in certain places to discuss some of the things that I share. And so, let's go. Chapter one, allow me to introduce myself. I was raised in an evangelical Christian home. I grew up going to Sunday service and attending Bible studies during the week. I can recall singing Jesus Loves Me and remember the emotional high of youth retreats. I danced in church and took part in the Christmas choir. I saw the Holy Spirit move powerfully through a congregation as demons fled and elders prophesied boldly. I said my prayers each night and told Jesus how much I loved him. I made the decision to be baptized at the tender age of 9 years old because my pastor felt that I was wise beyond my years. I gave Jesus my life and promised to live each day for him. At the time, I didn't fully know what that meant. I simply knew that I had a purpose, that Jesus loved me, and that I would figure it all out one day. Childhood innocence faded as I entered my teen years, a time with a great desire for acceptance, questions about the world, and a lot of media programming. By the age of 21, I had multiple piercings, purple hair, a tattoo that says coexist, one of many, and a really bad attitude. My outfit of choice was fishnets, shorts, a band shirt, and a choker with combat boots. Heavy metal is my music of choice. Weed is my escape, and God is a creation of humanity used to control the population. How did I get here? We all have our stories. Some of you are like me and have experienced rejection from peers, isolation, a single parent home, and other child or teen traumas. In the name of love, security, and acceptance, my identity was slowly molded into whatever would meet those needs. I was sort of like a chameleon. I could be whatever you wanted me to be as long as it meant I was given the attention and love that I craved. I mean, honestly, who didn't want to look like those beautiful celebrities on TV and the magazines? I believed that I had to look, talk, and act like them in order to be loved and accepted. The worst part was that Jesus wasn't cool. If you wanted to be in, he had to be out. I remember specifically being teased and called the Jesus girl or something to that effect. I found myself to be stuck. I wanted to fit into the world, but I also knew that angels were all around me and that God saw everything that I did. It was with this half-hearted faith and deep desire for acceptance that I made my way to college, as if middle and high school were not traumatizing enough. Win number one in college was the long-term relationship. I had always desired to have a boyfriend. I remember longing for love and relationship. I would tell myself, I have so much love to give and nobody to give it to. Something wrong with me? For 19-year-old me, that wasn't a problem. I was physically in the best shape of my life and I gained a lot of attention. I was loved, right? I had plenty of friends and would get invited to house parties. I was accepted. I was immensely busy with my theater group. I had a purpose. I worked and made pretty decent money as a server and bartender. I was secure. All of my deepest needs and desires were met, and I made it happen. Why did I need God? A faith crushing experience. Truthfully, I didn't leave the faith right away. It was a process. God has blessed me with a logical mind. I love to learn about the facts, documentaries excite me, and I feel energized when my brain is working. At this point in my life, I was somewhere in between balancing the intellectual and the sublime. The mundane and profane always felt to be at odds with the heavenly and celestial. I was the girl who debated my atheist coworker at the bar. I was the girl defending the faith to my Satanist theater mate. I was the girl who challenged the professor after being bombarded with the teachings of agnostic philosophers. There was one particular moment that really shattered my fragile faith. It was my sophomore year of college. I walked into the third and last philosophy class that I had to take, and I looked up at the board, and there it was. Nietzsche. God is dead. God is a human creation. God is used to control the populace. I I sat there slightly offended, but I wasn't yet ready to challenge my professor. He was a lot smarter than I was, right? I mean, what could I possibly say? Aside from the fact that I learned that what happened last time, I made a comment in front of my peers, which was in favor of a Christian worldview. That meant rejection. No, I couldn't go through that again. I sat there with my mind racing. I was fairly sure that God existed. I've had several supernatural experiences in my youth that were undeniable to not believe that there was a spiritual world. I didn't personally know God, I just knew that his existence was far more likely than his non-existence. I went home that night and contemplated all of these things. I found that in trying to understand how one would come to the conclusion that there is no God, I was beginning to understand my own doubts. Maybe my professor, who had claimed himself to be an atheist, had faith at one time. A little boy who prayed and heard silence. Maybe he saw the corruption of the televangelist, money in exchange for pardons, petitions, and prayers. Maybe he made one too many mistakes and was met with legalism, thus the importance of grace. In exchange for truth, he was sold the lie. God is dead. A swirl of black haze clouded my mind. I searched my personal library for something that could answer my questions. There it was, a little white book on science in the Bible. I thought that maybe someone else could say it better than I had felt equipped to handle. I went in the next day and sat through another lecture about how our society has surpassed the need for an invented God. I took a deep breath, handed him the book, and waited. I approached him 3 days later, asking what he thought. He looked at the book, looked at the trash, and said, "Throw this garbage out." I was in shock. I felt the weight of 1,000 bricks. This was only the beginning of the journey I would now embark on to lose and rediscover my faith. I say all of this looking back on the situation. They say hindsight is 2020. Sometimes it takes confronting your fears, doubts, and critics to strengthen what you know to be true. Veritas, said Pilate to Christ. Pilate, my professor, and I had something in common. We all needed John 14:6. Can you relate? The thing is that it isn't only philosophy class that can lead to a faith crisis. It's other classes as well. My other classes were built around a very linear storyline. We were taught of holy wars waged in the name of Christianity, centuries of bloodshed in the name of religion, money, and power. We were taught about early American Christians who hanged witches and owned slaves. We were taught that the age of imperialism was meant to spread Christianity. We were taught about the gods of the Greco-Roman Empire. We were taught Egyptian mythology and learned about the afterlife. We were taught the theory of evolution and told that our existence was nothing more than mere chance. We were taught that humans were cancer to the earth, and so we better recycle. We are taught about Muhammad, Buddha, and Krishna. We are taught to stand for what is right, but our moral compass was centered on our own personal thoughts and beliefs. For everything we were taught, there was much that we did not learn. Excluded from our education was the message of the gospel. Excluded were the countless churches that fought against slavery and racism. Excluded were the missionaries who fed the poor. Excluded were the words of Jesus, who taught that not everyone who claimed to know him was actually of him. Excluded was the value of each human life as an intentional creation. Excluded was a more conservative, moralistic worldview. Excluded were the many scientists, philosophers, and mathematicians who believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was a God. Excluded were the historical accounts of the persecution of the early church. The education system focuses heavily on inclusivity, and yet we were excluded. I sat through many lectures and heard the judgments made about Christians. In a traditional college setting, Christianity is often viewed as synonymous with Republican. The social engineering of the 2016 election really caused a great divide in our country and for this generation. This book is not meant to spark a political debate, but rather to point your attention to the culture that has been created around the social discourse. We live in a society where if you don't like something, you cancel it. We delete, remove, and block, none of which is a healthy way to engage in debate. Would it surprise you to learn that the college classroom is not very different? I could recall countless examples of this type of thinking from professors, guest speakers, and peers. So here was the Molotov cocktail of my senior year: low self-esteem, pain, an identity crisis, and wavering faith. I didn't graduate college prepared to fully embrace the world. Instead, I came out with more questions than I had in the first place. Some days I was an agnostic atheist, other days a self-proclaimed spiritualist who ascribed to New Age and Jain teachings, which is really just witchcraft. Quite frankly, some of you reading this right now might not even see the problem with witchcraft, as it has become so normalized in our generation. I will say that we will discuss that in a later chapter. It's safe to say I was really confused. I didn't know who I was, what I was meant to do, what to believe, or who was right. There was an empty void inside that seemed to grow larger every day. I know that there are many students out there who have felt or currently feel this way. I know there are many of you out there who feel like God has failed you, and what you're learning now feels more real and tangible. I know that you picked up this book for a reason. You are not alone. This is for you.